Hello everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this. Today we're exploring the evolution of psychological thought. We're going to trace exactly how humanity's attempt to understand the mind shifted from abstract philosophical musings all the way to rigorous, observable science. It's an absolutely fascinating journey, and it really unpacks how we arrived at our current, highly sophisticated understanding of human behavior.
Here's the quick look at where we're headed. First, we'll look at the origins of psychological thought. Second, the clash of structuralism versus behaviorism. Third, contemporary approaches. And finally, psychology in real life.
All right, let's kick things off with Part 1, Origins of Psychological Thought, laying the foundation.
The development of psychology definitely wasn't some sudden overnight realization, and this brilliantly illustrates how the field actually evolved in distinct eras. Era 1 starts with those early origins, deeply rooted in ancient philosophy. This was a time when thinkers were basically just pondering the mind logically, right? Long before it became a formalized, measurable science. From those philosophical roots, we transitioned into Era 2, which is marked by heavily defined historical schools of thought. And those schools eventually paved the strict, scientific way for Era 3, our contemporary modern practice. Let's move into those historical schools and see exactly how this builds.
Which brings us to Part 2, Structuralism versus Behaviorism, the Great Divide. Prepare yourselves, things are about to get heated.
So, structuralism focused aggressively on the underlying structure of the mind. We're talking about thinkers like Wilhelm Wundt and Edward Titchener. They actually believed that by using this strict method called introspection, basically having trained subjects deeply and methodically analyze their very own internal mental experiences, we could literally map out the fundamental frameworks of human consciousness. The ultimate goal here? Break down internal thoughts into their most basic elemental parts. It's kind of like trying to find the atoms of the mind.
But as you might guess, that heavily internal approach triggered a massive counter-movement, behaviorism. Pioneered by figures like John B. Watson and later on B.F. Skinner, behaviorism completely, and I mean completely, rejected introspection. They demanded that psychology be treated as a hard science, akin to physics. To these guys, unprovable internal thoughts were totally irrelevant. Instead, they argued the field must focus purely on observable actions and environmental conditioning. It was a radical, massive pivot from the unseen, hidden mind to the visible, measurable reaction.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the immense tension between these two perspectives actually pushed the entire field forward. You had this deeply internal, structural focus on one side, clashing directly with external, observable behaviorism on the other. And it was this very friction that forced psychology to critically refine its scientific methods. The rigorous demands of those behaviorists basically forced future psychologists to find much more objective, measurable ways to eventually study the internal, cognitive processes that the structuralists originally cared about. Talk about a productive rivalry.
Moving right along to Part 3. Contemporary psychological approaches. Welcome to the modern era.
So, these contemporary approaches didn't just toss the past out the window. They actually synthesized it. Take the cognitive revolution, for example. It beautifully merged the internal focus of structuralism with the strict scientific rigor demanded by behaviorism. Today's psychological models take the absolute best empirical lessons from those early historical battles and adapt them to explain the highly complex human behavior we see today. Modern practice heavily relies on this multifaceted evolution to treat patients and study the mind using some incredibly sophisticated measurable frameworks.
And that leads us to Part 4, Psychology in Real Life, or as I like to call it, the so what.
So, the crucial point is that psychology isn't just a dusty collection of historical debates, it is actively applied in real-life situations every single day. For instance, the principles of behaviorism, they're directly embedded into the algorithms of those habit tracking apps on your phone right now, using conditioning and rewards to keep you engaged. Meanwhile, that structuralist and cognitive desire to map internal thoughts is the exact engine behind modern cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. This is a practice that helps millions of people actively rewire their internal thought patterns to literally change their external reality.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Which psychological approach is driving your behavior today? Think about it. When you make a decision, are you acting from deep internal mental structures, or are you simply reacting to the observable forces and conditioning in your environment? It's a pretty fascinating lens to view your daily life through, don't you think? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep observing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.